Good afternoon, grade 11. Since we are through discussing about tsunami or how tsunami works, let us move on with SAGE. So this is another secondary earthquake hazards. So when we're talking about SAGE, this is actually a standing wave in an enclosed or partially enclosed body of water. This is triggered by the seismic activity, particularly the earthquake waves, which is have been observed on lakes, reservoirs, swimming pools, bays, harbors, and seas. So most often, these sitches is always associated with water. So the key requirement for sage formation is that the body of water must be at least partially bounded, so allowing the formations of the standing wave. So another way also to envision a sage is that it is to and fro motion of water produced by a forcing motion on as enclosed body of water. So the forcing motion, such as earthquake or winds, initiate a standing wave in the water. So this standing wave is now a superposition of waves that travels the whole length of the water and are then reflected back in the opposite direction. So take note, tsunami is different from siege since this siege happens in an enclosed body of water, meaning it should be surrounded by land before or so it can finally form. Unlike two tsunamis that it is generated in an open wide space or in an open water bodies. So that is the difference between tsunami and a siege. Moving on, we also have flood. We're familiar with flood already. So flooding. So apart from the incessant rain, flooding can also be a result of an earthquake. So when tsunami hits land, the water that remains can flood the coastal areas. So a landslide that hits a river can cause the water to swell and pour out on the areas beside the river. So when an earthquake breaks a dam, the water flowing out could cause massive flooding in the low-lying areas. So no matter what the cause, flooding is also a possible reason for loss of life and damage to property. This has been constantly being experienced in our country, particularly these years since we are battling the climate change. So the usual thing that is happening before, or unusual thing rather, that is not happening before is happening now. That's why we are suffering from those hazards. Okay? So this picture, by the way, is cited from the internet, which is the effect of recent typhoon in Isabela before. Moving on, we also have the last part, which is fire. So a major secondary associated with an earthquake has been the possibility of fires breaking out after an earthquake. So how does this happen? So at the turn of the century, most fires were the result of candles or lanterns that were tipped over because of earthquakes. So in today's world, however, a myriad of possible sources of ignition, such as gas lines, electrical wires, and other utility wires, have become available or has been more likely the reason why fire happens as secondary earthquake hazard. So earthquake can also block access to the sources of water to fight the fire, or worse, block even the fire fighting equipment and vehicles. So this is especially true in the scenario predicted by the MMEIRS, which is the study for the big one, particularly to the metropolitan. So, according to them, there would be almost 500 simultaneous fire incidents immediately, outnumbering the fire apparatus of both the government and volunteer firefighters. So apart from that, an estimated 30 kilometers of water main will be damaged. So making water supply a big problem in trying to fight the fire. So a perfect example of this is the 1995 Kobe earthquake in Japan. This is the effect of that particular earthquake in Japan before, where hundreds of fires broke out but water was unavailable due to broken water mains. So this just shows how destructive and how can an earthquake triggers fire into places that it hits. Okay. I cannot show you the video clip of this Kobe earthquake since it is asynchronous class, but you can perhaps search it in the internet. There are so many video clips that we can see online. Okay? So that is still about the secondary earthquake hazards. Now, let us talk about earthquake, particularly the concept of intensity and magnitude. So magnitude is a measure of earthquake size. So particularly, this releases the energy. So this remains unchanged with respect to the distance from the earthquake origin. While intensity describes the degree of shaking caused by an earthquake at a given place and decreases with distances from the earthquake origin or epicenter. In simpler means, when we refer about intensity, this can be the effect of the energy which is released in the term magnitude. So an earthquake with a magnitude of 5.4 may have an intensity of 6 in the epicentral area. So magnitude measurement requires instrumental monitoring of its calculation. However, assigning an intensity requires a sample of the felt responses of the population. So these felt responses are then graded according to the European macroseismic scale. So for example, intensity 1 is not felt, 2 is scarcely perceptible, 3 is weak, which is felt by a few, up to 12 assigned for total devastation. So you may have heard about the Richter scale. So this is used to study earthquakes. In 1935, Charles Richter, which is the one who developed this system, used this to measure the magnitude or amount of energy of an earthquake. So each whole number on the Richter scale indicates a tenfold increase in amplitude, meaning the greatness in size. So thus, a 7.5 earthquake on the Richter scale actually has 10 times the amplitude of a 6.5 earthquake. Meaning there is no earthquake on the Richter scale there is no upper limit on the Richter scale, meaning it could be used to measure magnitude 10 earthquakes or more if one ever occurred. So the most devastating earthquakes ever recorded are 8 or 9 on the Richter scale, and we wouldn't want to experience that. So another measurement used for the earthquake is known to be modified Mercalli scale, which measures intensity or how strong the effects of the earthquakes are. So that's why these two instruments are very important, so we can able to determine what magnitude it is and how the strict does it have. Okay, so the intensity varies based on position relative to the epicenter of the earthquake. So one earthquake does not have a specific number from the scale assigned to it as with the Richter scale. So the Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology adopted its own scale which is called PHIVOX Earthquake Intensity Scale. This measures how earthquake is felt based on its effect on an area. So this is represented by Roman numerals starting with I being 1, being weakest, and is categorized as scarcely perceptible, and X as 10 being the strongest or completely devastating. So let me read to you the intensity scale as well as its description. Okay. So we have here 1 and 2. Of course, we will always start with 1. So 1 is intensity 1, which is scarcely perceptible, describes as perceptible to people under favorable circumstances. So delicately balanced objects are disturbed, slight or still water in containers oscillates slowly. So this is just this is not really very observed. Yes. Next, intensity 2 slightly felt. This is felt by few individuals at rest indoors, meaning inside an enclosed space. So hanging objects swing slightly. Still water in containers oscillates noticeably. Third, intensity 3, which is considered as weak, felt by many people indoors, especially in upper floor of buildings. So many people, vibration is felt like one passing of a light truck. So dizziness and nausea are experienced by some people. So hanging objects swing moderately, and the still water in containers oscillates moderately. So based from these first three intensity scale, you can infer now that as it increases in the number of intensity scale, mas lumalala siya. Okay? The fourth one, moderately strong. So this is felt generally by people outdoors in comparison to the second and the third, which is mainly two indoors. So light sleepers are awakened. Vibration is felt like a passing of heavy truck. Hanging objects swing considerably. Dinner plates, glasses, windows, and door rattle. Imagine that. So floor and walls of wood frame buildings creak. Standing motor cars may rock slightly. Liquids in containers are slightly disturbed. Water in containers oscillates strongly. Rumbling sound may sometimes be heard. So the next intensity scale is fifth, considered as strong. So this is generally felt by most people indoors and outdoors, not just outdoors but also indoors. So this is the first intensity scale the first intensity scale where earthquakes are both felt indoors and outdoors. So many sleeping people are awakened. Some are frightened, some run outdoors. Strong shaking and rocking felt throughout the building. So hanging objects swing violently. Dining utensils clatter and clink. Some are broken. Some light and unstable objects may fall or overturn. Liquids spill from filled open containers. Standing vehicles rock noticeably, and shaking of leaves and twigs of trees are very evident. 6, which is very strong. Many people are frightened, many run outdoors. So some people lose their balance, motorists feel like driving in flat tires. So heavy objects or furniture move or may be shifted. So small church bells may ring, wall plaster may crack, very old or poorly built houses and structures are slightly damaged, though well-built structures are not affected. So limited rock falls and rolling boulders occur in hilly to mountain areas and escarpments. Trees are noticeably shaken also. Next, destructive. So this is now the intensity scale of earthquake that can generate. I'm sorry, we're talking about intensity pala, not magnitude. Okay, so most people are frightened and run outdoors. Many people find it difficult to stand in upper floors. Heavy objects and furniture overturn or topple. Big church bells may ring. Old or poorly built structures suffer considerably damage. Some well-built structures are slightly damaged. Some cracks may appear on dikes, fish ponds, road surface, or concrete hollow block walls. And there can be limited liquefaction, lateral spreading, and landslides. Next, very, very destructive. So people find it difficult to stand even outdoors. Many well-built buildings are considerably damaged. Concrete dikes and foundations of bridges are destroyed by ground settling or toppling. Railway tracks are bent or broken. Tombstone may be displaced, twisted, or overturned. Utility posts, tower, and monuments may tilt or topple. Water and sewer pipes may be bent, twisted, or broken. So liquefaction and lateral spreading cause human-made structure to sink, tilt, or topple. Numerous landslides and rockfalls occur in mountainous and hilly areas. Boulders are thrown out from their positions, particularly near the epicenter. Fissures and faults rupture may be observed. Trees are violently shaken, and water splash or stop over dikes or banks of rivers. Next to intensity scale 9, known as devastating. People are forcibly thrown to the ground. Many cry and shake with fear. Most buildings are totally damaged. Bridge and elevated concrete structures are toppled or destroyed. Numerous utility posts, towers, and monuments are tilted, toppled, or broken. Water sewer pipes are bent, twisted, or broken. Landslide and liquefaction with lateral spreading and sand boils are widespread. The ground is distorted into undulations. So trees are shaken very violently with some toppled or broken. Boulders are commonly thrown out. River water splashes violently on slopes, over dikes, and banks. Okay. And of course, the last one, which is completely devastating. Practically, all human-made structures are destroyed. Massive landslides and liquefaction, large-scale subsidence and uplifting of land forms, and many ground fissures are observed. So change in river courses and destructive seiches in large lakes occur, and many trees are toppled, broken, or uprooted. Do not worry. Um, this intensity 10 has not been felt pa naman. And I hope that the magnitude 10 and intensity scale 10 will not be experienced. Okay. So to measure the strength of an earthquake, a device which is known to be seismograph or seismometer is used. So it is a measuring instrument that creates the seismogram, a record of the seismic waves from an earthquake. So this instrument works based on the principle of inertia that states a suspended mass tends to remain still when the ground moves. The motion between the suspended mass and the ground will then be a measure of the ground's motion activity. Okay. So let us now talk about the hazard map. Though it has been, we have an idea about this already since it has been discussed in the midterm. Okay. So how do we interpret and use a hazard map? Of course, hazard maps are very helpful in making emergency plans. So these hazard maps are essential in understanding the risks present in a certain area. So it shows the different degrees of hazard usually classified into low, moderate, and high degrees. But apparently, in the hazard map that you can see, there are 6 legends there, starting from very low hazard to very high hazard. So the hazard map created by the Manila Observatory and the Department of Education and DENR shows the vulnerability and probability of an earthquake in the country. So in this map, the darker the color, the higher the risk to earthquake. Look at here. So this shows that with the exception of Palawan, the number of earthquakes is distributed towards all the provinces of the Philippines. So the further identified 10 provinces which will be most likely hit by an earthquake are Surigao del Sur, La Union, Benguet, Pangasinan, Pampanga, Ifugao, Davao Oriental, Nueva Vizcaya, and Nueva Ecija. As you can see from the map. Okay? So now, let us move on to the precautionary and safety measures. But before we move on to that, of course, there are other maps which depicts other hazards that the country is at risk for. So the local government units must also have their own copies detailing the risks on their areas of responsibility. So getting a copy of these maps and using them to your advantage will ensure minimal loss of life and property in case an earthquake occurs. So other practical uses of a hazard map includes development of new building codes, buildings and design, citing best locations of bridges nationwide, determinations of issuance rates, business and land use planning, and many others. Okay. So one way to prevent the casualties during earthquake is to construct our houses and buildings according to the National Building Code of the Philippines. So in the last few years, PHIVOLCS under Director Renato Saridom has been stressing the need for the public to be conscious of the potential danger or disaster and act to make their homes more resilient to it. So we all need to do our part, of course, in increasing our resiliency to earthquakes and other natural hazards. So there are buildings designed to be shock-proof or earthquake shock-proof. So it is up now for the owners of the building or owners of that structure whether they will invest to that such design. Okay. Moving on to precautionary and safety measures. So, an extra effort on your part should be focused on the prevention or mitigation measures before an earthquake occurs. So, since there is no way that earthquakes can be accurately predicted, preparing to lessen its impact becomes a priority. Choosing the correct areas to build in structures based on hazard maps would be one of the foremost preventive measures. So checking the stability of objects that are hung on walls or inside cabinets could also mitigate the effects of an earthquake. So here are some of the things that we could do before, during, and after an earthquake. Before an earthquake, hang heavy items such as pictures and mirrors away from beds, couches, and anywhere people see. Para in para in case na mangyari na siya, hindi mahulugan yung tao. Or kung ano man yung maaring paghulugan niya na makakapag-cause ng disaster. Next, brace overhead light fixtures. Repair defective electrical wirings and leaky gas connections. This can be a potential fine risk. Secure a water heater by strapping it to the wall studs and bolting it to the floor. What else? Repair any deep cracks in ceilings or foundations. Get expert advice if there are signs of structural defects. Store weed killers, pesticides, and flammable products securely in closed cabinets with latches and on bottom shelves. This could be a secondary effect or secondary effect of hazards if we do not make sure of this. So strap or bolt heavy furnitures, cabinets to the walls. Check the stability of hanging objects like ceiling fans and chandeliers. What else? Familiarize yourself with the exit routes or whatever. Know where fire extinguishers, first aid kits, alarms, and communication facilities are located. Learn how to use them beforehand. It's important to know where you can get the fire extinguisher so that you will immediately mapatay yung mismong apoy. At the same time, if you're prepared, if you are knowledgeable, you know how to act immediately in case that there are injured person. So, conduct and participate in regular earthquake drills so that you can practice what can happen. Next, what about during an earthquake? Okay. So, during an earthquake, we should know how to tap the ground, take cover by getting under a study table or other piece of furniture, and hold on until the shaking stops. If there is no table or desk near you, cover your face and head with your arms and crouch in an inside corner of the building. Stay away from glass windows, outside doors and walls, and anything that could fall, such as lighting fixtures or furniture. Staying away from glass windows can prevent you from having debris or exposing your eyes to debris that could damage your eyes. Knowing that your eyes is very sensitive also, and it's just jelly-like. And of course, furniture also para walang madaganan. Stay in bed if you are there when the earthquake strikes. Hold on and protect your head with a pillow unless you are under a heavy light pillow that could fall, in which case move to the nearest safe place. Use a doorway for shelter only if it is in close proximity to you and if you know it is strongly supported. Stay inside until shaking stops and it is safe to go outside. Research has shown the most injuries occur when people inside buildings attempt to move to a different location inside the building or try to leave. Be aware that the electricity may go out or the sprinkler system or fire alarms may turn on. And of course, do not use elevators. What should be done during an earthquake sa outdoors? Stay outdoors away from buildings, street lights, and utility wires para hindi ka madaganan. Once in the open, stay there until the shaking stops. If you are near buildings with glass panels, move away from them as they have the tendency to squeeze out from their hinges, becoming flying daggers. Move away from steep slopes which may be affected also by landslides. So this is all done in outdoors. How about inside a vehicle? So stop as quickly as safety permits and get out of the vehicle. Avoid stopping near or under buildings, trees, overpasses, and utility wires. Dun sa mga bridges also. Proceed cautiously once the earthquake has stopped. Avoid roads, bridges, or ramps that might have been damaged by the earthquake. How about at the beach? I think I forgot to put it. Anyway, I will just inform you. In a beach, be aware of possible tsunamis if you are in a coastal areas. So there are also known as seismic sea waves, mistaken only as tidal waves. So when local authorities issue a tsunami warning, assume that a series of dangerous waves is on the way. So you should stay away from the beach and move to safe grounds. Also, when you see shoreline fall back and all you can see is sand, expect the sudden rush of water towards land. So use this time to seek higher grounds, which should be at least 30 meters, or move inland at least 3,500 meters from the shore. Okay? Moving on after an earthquake. So you go out safely. Once the shaking stops, take the fastest and safest way out of the building. Do not use elevators. Do not use elevators in entering damaged buildings. Expect aftershocks. These secondary shock waves are usually less violent than the main quake, but can be strong enough to do additional damage to weakened structures and may occur at any time after an earthquake. You listen and be updated with the latest emergency information using a battery-operated radio or television. Use the telephone only for emergency calls and not in other means. So open also the cabinets cautiously and be aware of objects that can fall off shelves. Okay, so what else? Stay away from damaged areas. Stay away unless your assistance has been specifically requested by police, fire, or relief organization. Then return home only when authorities have already said so. Help injured or trapped person. Remember to help your neighbors who may require special assistance, infants, the elderly, and people with disabilities. What else? Clean up spilled medicines, bleaches, gasoline, or other flammable liquids immediately. Leave the area if you smell gas or fumes and other chemicals. Give first aid where appropriate. Do not move seriously injured individuals unless they are in immediate danger of further injury. You need to call for help if you still have time. Inspect utilities, check for gas leaks, look for electrical damage, check for sewage and water lines damage, and if you have to leave the house because it is no longer safe for you, leave a note at the door as to where you are going para hindi maguluhan yung family mo pag hinahanap ka na nila. Okay? So that is all about the anatomy of disasters, particularly to earthquake.